Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is official. Black Clover's anime is coming back. One of the greatest shonen anime of all time that has been on hiatus for 4+ years now has, of just a couple of hours ago, at least as I'm recording this video, been announced to be returning. But who made this announcement? Is it actually official? When is Black Clover coming back? Who's animating it? Is it coming back weekly or seasonal? Oh my god, we have so many questions, all of which I'm gonna try and answer today. Because today we're talking Black Clover's anime is coming back. But before it's coming on any backs, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video a week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to the Forest of Death, and Orochimaru is staring at Sasuke in a way that I'm not entirely comfortable with. So, this information of Black Clover's anime coming back, where did it come from? Am I reporting on a leak? Is this official news? Well, kind of, to both, actually. See, Shonen Jump issue 32 just came out in Japan, and while it takes a little bit longer to come out here than it does in Japan, this 30-second iteration of the weekly Shonen Jump, which leaked on July 3rd, showed us that Black Clover's anime is going to be coming back. So while technically this information does come from a leak, it comes from a leak of Shonen Jump number 32. So it is an official leak that confirms to us that Black Clover's next season is in production. Now this is wild news because it's been years since we got any Black Clover content in terms of animation. The last episode of Black Clover came out on October 10th, 2021, meaning by the end of this anime season, it's gonna be 4 years since we got any Black Clover anime. But why? Why was Black Clover placed on this 4-year hiatus? Wasn't it massively popular? And yeah, it was. And ironically, the last 10 or so episodes of Black Clover are talked about as the best episodes in Black Clover. So how did this show that was insanely popular and had an insane amount of momentum hit a 4-year hiatus? Well, Black Clover was actually very different from a lot of other mega shonen. While Black Clover did have its flaws, those flaws were not pacing or filler. See, over the course of Black Clover's 170 episodes, only 17 episodes are filler, giving Black Clover amongst mega shonen a league-leading 10% filler rate. Tie this into the fact that in those 157 canon episodes, Black Clover adapted 270 chapters of manga, and the pacing of Black Clover never felt anything even close to slow, as Black Clover adapted close to 1.7 chapters of manga for every episode of anime. And thus, if this show didn't have pacing issues like One Piece, didn't have filler issues like some other Studio Period projects like Bleach or Naruto, was massively beloved, had momentum, and was heading into what a lot of people believe is its best arc in the Dark Triad arc, how did it get slapped with a 4-year hiatus? Well, the answer is twofold. One, while it didn't have pacing issues or filler issues, it had animation issues, with the first 100 or so episodes of Black Clover being, I hate to say it, flat out ugly. And while the animation of the show absolutely gets better the deeper into it you get, when you go back and watch some of the most important fights that take place in the first 100 episodes of Black Clover, it is kind of a travesty to see the way that they were animated. But why? Why was a show being animated by a major studio in Studio Period that had pulled off incredible animation feats with projects like Naruto and Bleach not giving any attention to Black Clover? Well, it's not like they weren't trying, but here's the thing. Black Clover was released in an era where mega shonens had to be run weekly. And thus, from episode 1 to episode 70, Black Clover released once a week. Weekly releases for almost 3.5 years. And thus, when Black Clover needed to look good, it looked okay, but when it didn't need to look good, it looked bad. And thus, a lot of the love that Black Clover possibly could have garnered, it lost because a lot of it doesn't look that great. Especially in an era between 2017 and 2021, when anime were beginning to look absolutely ridiculously gorgeous. The second reason that Black Clover hit a 4-year hiatus is also because it was weekly. Its burn rate of about 1.7 chapters per episode meant that eventually the anime was going to catch up with the manga. And it did exactly that, with the anime coming within a mere dozen or so chapters of the manga when it ended at episode 170. And therefore, in order to not fill the show with an insane amount of filler or do an alternate anime ending like Tokyo Ghoul or Soul Eater, Studio Period decided the best thing to do for the moment was just put Black Clover on the back burner. But it's been 4 years now, and the gap between anime and manga is about as wide as as it's ever gonna be. See, if you just watched all of Black Clover, and let's say you finished today, where you would pick up the manga is chapter 270. But the most recent chapters that came out of Black Clover, which came out May 1st of this year, were chapter 379 and 380, meaning the manga is now 110 chapters ahead of the anime, which means seemingly Black Clover's anime is never gonna need to worry about catching up to its manga ever again. Unless, of course, Black Clover did make a return as a weekly anime. But do I believe that's gonna happen? No. See, Studio Period, who makes Bleach, Boruto, and Black Clover, or as I like to refer to them, the Triple Bs, had their president interviewed about a year ago, and in that interview, he said a couple of really interesting things. The most pertinent of which to today's conversation was in regards to Studio Period's animes on hiatus. Now, at the time of this interview, Studio Period had two very notable anime on hiatus. Those being Boruto and Black Clover. Two shows that ironically suffered from the same weakness, being a weekly release anime, with a manga that either wasn't far enough ahead of the anime or just simply didn't release weekly. But anyways, the president in this interview stated that the success of Bleach's TYBW 3 cores seemed to confirm to him and the rest of Studio Period that these mega shonen, even though they once existed as weekly releases, as Bleach existed as a weekly release anime for, oh my god, like close to 7 years, didn't need to remain weekly release animes for the rest of their lifetimes. And thus Studio Period, even though they were releasing technically less Bleach content, saw a massive outpouring of love for the Bleach content that they were releasing. And thus it was the success of TYBW that made the president and Studio Period realize that their anime on hiatus should most likely return as seasonal and not weekly. And thus I can say with almost 100% certainty that when Black Clover does make its return, that it will be seasonal, which would not only allow for Black Clover to address its biggest weakness, which was its animation, but would also make sure that Black Clover never has another chance of catching up with the manga ever again. See, because if we assume that when Black Clover returns, it's gonna adapt about 2 chapters per episode, that would mean that there's somewhere in the region of 50 to 55 episodes left of Black Clover. Now, if it were to come back weekly, that would mean that Black Clover would be done in just over a year. It'd be closer to 1.2 years, because even though a weekly release anime is called a weekly release anime, they only release 48 episodes per year, as opposed to the 52 that one would assume because there's 52 weeks in a year. And if you tie all of this into the establishment of Studio Period Films, who are a subsection of Studio Period dedicated to making their projects look as beautiful as possible, who are responsible for the 3rd core of TYBW and are going to be finishing the final core of TYBW, the 4th one, it actually makes a lot of sense that after Studio Period Films is done with the 4th and final core of TYBW, that they'll be taking on Black Clover. But Nick, how can you say that with literally any certainty whatsoever? Well, here's the thing. If you follow the posting schedule of TYBW's 3 cores, you'll find that it takes usually about a year for them to come out. The first core was released in fall of 2022. The second core was released only 9 months later in the summer of 2023. Now, the third core, which was done by Studio Period Films, was released in fall of 2024, which means it took about 15 months to make. And as Studio Period Films is going to be doing the 4th and final core, and it should be about 12 episodes like the other cores, this means that the 4th and final core of TYBW should be coming out in the winter or spring of 2026. And while we have no official release date yet, that's probably our best estimate. But once the 4th and final core of TYBW is out, Studio Period Films doesn't have a whole lot to work on. I mean, all they've ever worked on that's even remotely important is TYBW Core 3. I mean, they also did Osu Matsu-san's 4th season, but I don't think that's exactly eating up a whole lot of their time. It's an adaptation of a manga from the 60s. Anyways, all this is to say that Studio Period Films, a subsection of Studio Period that was set up specifically to make their IP look as shiny and beautiful as possible, is gonna have some empty and idle hands come early to mid 2026. And considering the fact that we have gotten literally no announcements about the return of Boruto whatsoever, all of this lines up pretty well for Black Clover to be taken over by the most expensive and most detailed section of Studio Period. And this timeline makes a lot of sense when you consider the fact that most anime takes somewhere in the region of 16 to, at the very longest, 24 months to make. And as the report that we got from the 32nd issue of Shonen Jump was simply that Black Clover's new anime season is in production, that seems to mean that production has just started, and therefore the timeline for when we're going to see Black Clover come out is optimistically 16 months, pessimistically 24 months, and realistically somewhere in the middle. And therefore, while there is a possibility it could come out in late 2026, it's most realistically going to be somewhere in early 2027. Which, I mean, I know we'll all be dead by then, but hey, At least we have something to live for. But with this early to mid 2027 release date, that lines up perfectly with the end of Bleach. But if Studio Period Films does end up taking over Black Clover, what does that mean for Black Clover? How many episodes are we going to get? How much is left to be adapted? What's the pacing going to look like? So on and so forth. Well, as it currently stands, like we said earlier in the video, episode 170 of Black Clover leaves off on chapter 270 of the manga, and the Spade Kingdom raid arc doesn't end until chapter 331, meaning that there are 61 chapters left in this arc that the hiatus began in. Now, if we assume that Studio Period is going to continue pacing Black Clover in the way that they paced it previously, at the clip of about 1.7 chapters per episode, this would mean that the rest of the Spade Kingdom raid arc is going to take about 36 episodes to adapt. And that's actually kind of convenient, because 36 episodes is exactly 3 12-episode seasons. Now, however, like we touched on earlier, 1.7 chapters per episode is a bit slow for modern new-gen anime, but it's not unheard of. Now, if they were to increase the pacing to something like 2.5 chapters per episode, which is towards the higher end of what a new-gen anime does nowadays, that would bring them down to 24 episodes, and I can really see either of these as distinct possibilities. But when you consider the fact that TYBW is 218 chapters long and is going to get adapted in 48 episodes, which means it's adapting a blistering 4.5 chapters per episode, the idea that Studio Period and possibly Studio Period Films might up the pacing of Black Clover's last couple of arcs is not all that crazy. And thus, to me, it does seem more likely that Black Clover's best arc, at least in my personal opinion, the Spade Kingdom raid arc, will either be adapted in 2 12-episode seasons or 1 24-episode season. But really, however they go about adapting the anime, they're in the best situation they've ever been in. So even though Black Clover about a year and a half ago switched off Shonen Jump and went to Jump Giga, which is the quarterly release magazine from Shonen Jump that releases once every 3 months for 4 total times a year, Yuki Tabata, the mangaka, even though originally he was only posting 1 chapter every 3 months, has upped his output to 2 chapters every 3 months. And while chapter 380 kind of makes it seem like Black Clover isn't as close to the ending as we originally anticipated, with a cliffhanger being presented that makes it seem as though Asta's gonna go on some kind of additional training arc, when we all believe that the final battle was about to come to its climax in the next couple of chapters, I really can't see this manga going for anything longer than 10 or so more chapters. Maybe 6 or so chapters to finish up the last of the most important fights, and then 3 to 4 chapters to close out the story. And in this, and while I hesitate to call it this, but I guess worst case scenario, where Black Clover goes another 10 chapters, that would mean that the Black Clover manga is gonna take about 1.25 years to finish. Which actually works out very well, because many on the internet believe that Studio Period is actually trying to time the re-release of Black Clover's anime with the ending of its manga, capitalizing on the hype of the ending of its manga by bringing its anime out of retirement. And thus, if Black Clover's manga was to end in 5 or 6 quarterly cycles, it would end somewhere in the region of early 2027. And thus, the manga would be able to pass the baton to the anime to carry on the story to the masses. And rather perfectly, if there is 10 more chapters in Black Clover, the 120 chapters between chapter 270 and the presumed last chapter of chapter 390, when divided by the pacing of 2.5 chapters per episode, would mean that the rest of Black Clover would fit perfectly into 48 episodes, with the final arc perfectly fitting in an encapsulated 24-episode arc. So what's on the horizon for Black Clover and all of its fans? Well, seemingly a lot of good stuff. Whether it's the anticipated finale of the manga or the return of the anime, it's a good time to be a Black Clover fan. But that's actually not all that's going on with Black Clover right now. As in Shonen Jump's 32nd volume, with the promo and release of the information that Black Clover was going to be returning to the anime space, a QR code was also released that told people that Asta and Libe's new looks would be revealed in a promotional video on July 7th on Shonen Jump's YouTube channel. Now, new looks probably just means what Asta and Libe are going to look like when animated in the glorious animation of 2025's capabilities, but there's also the possibility that important information will be given to us in this promotional video. Now, I don't think it's going to be anything crazy like a release date, but I do believe it'll most likely give us something in the region of a release year. And thus, while we do know that Black Clover's anime is coming back until July 7th, that's unfortunately all we really know for sure. But boy, oh boy, is it fun to speculate about. But I want to hear from you guys. Are you excited for Black Clover's return, or did you already forget that it existed in the first place? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's the 4th of July, and I want to be in a pool.